Now tell me about the word Nephilim. What does that mean?
In the Hebrew, it comes from the verb nephal. It means the fallen ones, and that's the term used. Don't confuse that with the fallen angels. The fallen angels, according to Genesis 6, cohabited with human women to produce a hybrid offspring that are called in the Hebrew the Nephilim. In the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, the translation of the Old Testament into Greek, they use the word gigantes, which is transliterated giants, right. And they did happen to be giants, but that's not what the word means. The word actually means, in the Greek, the earthborn. And so, from the Greek point of view, they're earthborn. From the Hebrew point of view, they're the fallen ones. But either way, they're pointing to a hybrid, and it apparently was part of Satan's plan to contaminate the Messianic line.
But so the purpose of the flood was to get rid of these.
Exactly. That's that's exactly the point. You study verse 9 of Genesis 6. It speaks of Noah that his genealogy was untainted, unblemished, and apparently was a distinctive in that sense. He may not have been the only one unblemished, but the fact that he was unblemished qualified him for what God was going to do, among other things. But the point is, the whole issue that God chose to do was to save 8 people in the ark and erase the blackboard, so to speak.
Okay, but if the blackboard was erased, then we don't have to fool with them today, if they were all destroyed.
Except Genesis 6 verse 4 says there were Nephilim in the land in those days, comma, and also after that. And we discover, many good Bible scholars miss this, that you really won't understand subsequent events in the Old Testament by not realizing it happened again. When God, in Genesis 15 and Genesis 17, confirms the land covenant to Abraham, he tells Abraham that he and his descendants are going to be away for 400 years, but after 400 years, they're going to return. That gave Satan, who's obviously listening, the realization that he had 4 centuries to lay down a minefield. And that's why when Moses enters the land and he sends his at Kadesh Barnea, he sends in the 12 reconnoiters, if I can call them that. They come back and say, and Numbers 13, verse 33 says they were Nephilim in the land. So it happened again.
Before the flood that devastated mankind, according to biblical sources, a group of angels, the sons of God, came down to earth. These fallen angels, as they're often referred to, rebelled against God. They taught mankind the secret arts, shared with us knowledge that was reserved for the gods. They had intercourse with the women on our planet, fathering semi-divine offspring. The acts of these fallen angels caused the earth and its inhabitants to become defiled and impure. Our corruption and wickedness was so great in God's eyes that he decided to destroy all of the inhabitants of earth with a flood. Over the years, an ongoing debate has emerged surrounding the byproduct of this untoward union between the sons of God and the daughters of man. In many circles, it is believed that their ill-begotten children were a group of giants, the Nephilim. Who were the Nephilim? The word Nephilim appears twice in the Old Testament of the Bible. They are first mentioned in chapter 6 of the book of Genesis, and then again in Numbers 13:33. But their brief citation in the Bible has caused biblical scholars to argue over exactly who the Nephilim were. Much of this dispute stems from a short passage in the Bible that states, "Now it came about that when men started to grow in numbers on the surface of the ground, and daughters were born to them, then the sons of the true God began to notice the daughters of men, and that they were good-looking, and they went taking wives for themselves, namely, all they chose. After that, Jehovah said, My spirit shall not act toward man indefinitely, in that he is also flesh. Accordingly, his days shall amount to be 120 years. The Nephilim proved to be in the earth in those days, and also after that. When the sons of the true God continued to have relations with the daughters of men, and they bore sons to them, they were the mighty ones, who were of old, the men of fame. Genesis 6, 1 through 4. The traditional definition of the word Nephilim is giant. Some dictionaries describe the Nephilim as being giants who also possess superhuman strength. The document in which we find statements that directly support this claim actually come from the apocryphal Book of Jubilees. It states, "And it came to pass, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon. And they took themselves wives of all whom they chose. And they bare unto them sons, and they were giants." The Book of Jubilee, chapter 5, verse 1. Are the claims made by the writers within the Judeo-Christian tradition true? Were the Nephilim giants? Were these giants the byproduct of the relations between the sons of God and the daughters of men?
It says in the court of the gods, that refers to the angels. The book of Hebrews in the New Testament interprets the passage that it says, "He was made a little lower than the Elohim," as being a little lower than the Agelos, Reayelos, meaning angels. So it's a little lower than the angels. But anyway, the people who believe that the Nephilim are the sons of angels and the sons of men interpret this phrase, this Ha Elohim, to be a reference to the sons of God, referring to the angels. That's how they interpret it. And there's a problem with this. It's that angels can't have kids. And now they say, well, Jesus says that the angels cannot, they do not have wives. Well, that's true. And they say, well, angels here, they're just having sex and they're having kids. There's nothing that says they don't do that. Well, actually, there does. Let's scroll back a few verses back up. It says, "The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives." It says it took them as wives. And even the word wife is used. Nashim, meaning wives. So it says they did marry them. So the idea that they simply had sex isn't true. It says they took them as wives. But going back to the verse that says angels cannot marry or have sex, here's what Jesus says in Luke 20, verse 34 to 36. Jesus said unto them, "The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot even die anymore, for they are like the angels, and are the sons of God, being sons of the resurrection." When men multiplied on the earth, the angels of heaven came together with the daughters of men. In some copies I have found the sons of God. What is meant by the Spirit, in my opinion, is the descendants of Seth are called the sons of God on account of the righteous men and the patriarchs who have sprung from them, even down to the Savior himself. But the descendants of Cain are named the seed of men, as having nothing divine in them, on account of the wickedness of their race and the inequality of their nature, being a mixed people and having stirred the indignation of God. But if it is thought that these refer to angels, we must take them to be those who deal with magic and jugglery, who taught the women the motion of the stars and the knowledge of things celestial, by whose power they conceived the giants as their children, by whom wickedness came to its heights on the earth, until God decreed that the whole race of the living should perish in their impiety, by the deluge. So this was age. But anyway, what Ephraim the Syrian, who died around the year 373, in his commentary on Genesis, in the passage of Genesis 6 discussing the sons of man, he says, "After these things Moses wrote of the offspring produced from the union of the daughters of Cain and the sons of Seth, saying, There were mighty men in those days, and also afterwards, because judges went into the daughters of men. They bore the mighty men who were of old, the mighty men of renown. The mighty men who were born to the feeble tribe of Cain, and not to the mighty tribe of Seth, the house of Cain, because the earth had been cursed, so as to not give them its strength, produced small harvest, deprived of its strength, just as it is today, that some seeds, fruits, and grass give strength, and others do not, because at the same time they were cursed, and sons of the cursed, and were dwelling in the land of the curses." So we can see that St. Ephraim the Syrian, who was a doctor of the Catholic Church, who knew Syriac, his interpretation of Genesis was that the sons of God were the sons of Seth. They were not the sons of angels. The Nephilim were not some ET hybrid race. They were simply men from very different backgrounds, but men nonetheless.
If we look to mythology, perhaps we can find an answer. The notion of giants wandering the earth in ancient times is found globally. Stories of their existence come from North America, South America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Greek mythology tells of the origin of the giants. Long before man was created, the Titan god Kronos, in order to gain control of the Greek pantheon, conspired with his brothers, the other Titans, and rebelled against their father Uranus. The uprising concluded when Kronos castrated his father Uranus with a sickle and took dominion over the land. The story goes on to inform us that the giants were formed when the blood of the castrated Uranus fell upon the earth. These creatures were known as the Earthborn. The Earthborn were, when compared to us, giants. The giants under the rule of Kronos lived during the Golden Age, in a time that was free of sorrow or care. Everyone in this period lived happy and joyous lives. Life on Earth changed when Kronos' son Zeus fought and won control of both the heaven and the earth. Zeus, in his new role as chief god, according to Greek myth, put the giants to work. It was just a matter of time before the giants started ignoring Zeus's mandates. They were no longer prostrating themselves to Zeus and the will of the other gods. Their lack of complete servitude and their failure to comply with the gods' demands incited the children of God into a full-blown rebellion against their heavenly fathers. Heavy losses were taken on both sides, but their revolution was finally suppressed by the gods. A truce was declared. It was decided as part of their reparations to the giants to create a new race of beings to handle the burdens that had been forced upon the giants. From this decision, man in his current form was created. Pedro Collum, in his book entitled Orpheus, Myth of the World, relates this tale about the creation of man. Aztec legend recounts how the Earth Mother, Citlalique, gave birth to a flint knife. When the knife was flung down onto the earth, it was transformed into 1,600 earth gods. Could there be a connection between the flint knife flung down by Citlalique and the sickle used by Kronos to castrate his father? These newly formed earth gods lived as men and women and labored in search of food. After some time, the earth gods began to think that this work was below their station. After all, they were the children of the Sky Father and Earth Mother. They asked their mother Citlalique to make a race that would serve them and bear the burdens they faced. With the help of Citlalique, mankind was fashioned. These mythological traditions make it evident that the giants, the Nephilim, existed long before man first inhabited the earth. Thus, when reading the passage from the book of Genesis that states, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards," it seems clear that the authors were not being vague. Instead, they were making a statement of fact. The Nephilim, the earthborn, were on the earth at that time. Period. This brings us back to the question of the lineage of the sons of God and the daughters of man. The Hebrew Bible refers to them as Gibborim. The implied meaning of the word Gibborim is men of great stature, heroes, men who are valiant or brave. The Greek Septuagint identifies them as Remonadi, or men of renown. In Greek mythology, the gods have a long-standing history of having relations with humans. The names of some of these demigods, or semi-human individuals, who have withstood the tests of time were Hercules, Perseus, and Achilles. But demigods can be found in other cultures as well. In India, some of these semi-divine individuals were called Hanuman, Garunda. In Sumer, they were Gilgamesh and Adapa. Interestingly, a parallel myth to the biblical narrative found in Genesis does exist. It comes to us from the pages of the Hindu epic, the Ramayana. The Ramayana is the epic tale of Rama, the seventh avatar of the supreme god Vishnu. Rama lived during the Treta Yuga. It was an age where the world was filled with giants, monsters, serpents, and demons. When Rama was born, the supreme god Vishnu requested that all of the other gods descend to the earth and mate with the apes and bears. Vishnu, knowing what was in store for Rama, wanted to create an army to help Rama conquer and kill the giant demon king of Lanka, Ravana. The offspring of the unions between the various gods and the apes created a group of individuals who inherited a vast array of impressive skills. The son of the chief solar deity was destined to be the ruler of this new race of ape men, the Vanara. The demigod Hanuman was the son of the wind god and is described as being fleet of foot and as being able to travel as quick as the wind. The god of architecture fathered Nala and Nila. It was through their divine knowledge that they, with the help of the rest of the Vanara, built a bridge from mainland India to Lanka, a feat of engineering that many people believe still exists today. In this narrative, it was not only a few children who were born through this union, but thousands, each with his or her own unique godlike skills and abilities. These thousands did the gods create, endowed with might that none could mate, in monkey forms that changed at will, so strong their wish, the fiend to kill. The Ramayana. Returning to our original question, were the Nephilim the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of man? Based upon the source information we have just explored, the answer is a resounding no. It seems clear that the Nephilim lived on Earth long before man was created. Instead, the gods, when they mated with the inhabitants of the Earth, produced a group of individuals who had remarkable powers and abilities, skills that far exceeded their peers. Their legacy and renown have survived the tests of time, in that we still remember and speak their names today. And that is exactly what the Bible states. And they bore sons to them. They were the mighty ones who were of old, the men of fame. Genesis 6, verse 4.
Just as humans have special gifts and abilities and each is unique, so too the angels were unique, and each used their own special gifts for defiling mankind. So each taught mankind the arts which they themselves loved most. They took wives of human women whom they called beautiful, and fathered the race of giants we know as the Nephilim. Azazel was a lover of metals, and taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made them known to the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautying of the eyelids, and all manner of costly stones, and the coloring of tinctures. Samyaza taught the art of enchantments and root cuttings, and all manner of sexual seduction. Amaras taught the art of sexual lust. Barakijal taught astrology. Kokabel taught the constellations. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of the clouds. Arachiel taught the signs of the earth. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. And Sariel taught the course of the moon. Not only did the angels sin against man, but they sinned against animals as well. It is believed this means that they genetically engineered new kinds of creatures by mixing the genes of different kinds to create the mythological creatures of old. The corruption the angels had wrought upon the earth was so great that God decided to destroy both man and beast. So God commanded Noah, a man who was righteous and whose genes had not been affected by the work of the angels, to build an ark with which he would save the animals and mankind. But this was only half the story. The angels came and did their dirty deeds again, and created a second race of giants that filled the earth. This image depicts a Babylonian king, so large that he holds a lion in his arms like a man might hold a house cat. He also has 6 fingers and toes, which was common to some of the tribes of giants born after the flood, and is the result of a duplicate gene, an error, if you will, in the genetic tinkering of the Nephilim. There are a great many artifacts left behind by the Nephilim, including footprints which have been found in several places around the world. Skeletons of humans exceeding 16 feet in height have been found in Native American burial mounds and other places around the world. King Og of the Bible had a bed which was iron and 16 feet in length. This is a bed for a man that is 12 to 14 feet tall. The Nephilim vary greatly in size. Many Native American legends tell of men which were 25 to 35 feet tall and capable of throwing a bison over their shoulder and walking off with it. Most of these artifacts have been swept up by the National Geographic Society, and most notably by the Smithsonian Institute, in an effort to hide the legitimacy of the Bible from the world. The angels cast out of heaven brought a technological explosion to the world, and likewise their children, the Nephilim, also brought a technological explosion around the world after the Noachian flood. All within a couple of 100 years, great civilizations arose everywhere around the world. The Egyptians, the Chinese, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, the Native American cultures all arose approximately the same time. This explosion of knowledge was due to the Nephilim, who acquired this great knowledge from their forefathers, the angels cast from heaven. And at that time, the Nephilim created monumental statues and buildings all around the world as well, carving stones weighing up to 3,000 tons with mathematical precision. Stones so heavy and large we are incapable of moving them with modern equipment to this very day. Many like to believe that the giant statuary all around the world and all of the cultures of the world is merely an exaggeration of the kingship. This is false, however. They are actual depictions of the true sizes of men. Native American statues, for example, often depict the angels which were cast from heaven. The same is true in Babylonia, Sumeria, Egypt, and other cultures. This modern example of a Native American totem pole depicts an angel cast from heaven, fathering a Nephilim child. This chart shows us the great size of ancient giants. At the far left we see a normal man of 6 feet height, and at the far right a man of 36 feet in height. It also shows us how common the various giants were in their height. For example, it was most common for a giant to be approximately 15 to 16 feet tall. The next most common was approximately 8.5 feet, and so on to 36 feet. There is becoming a general consensus amongst historians that the most common tribe of giants in the world were the Kurgan. This statue in Russia depicts a Kurgan warrior, approximately 25 feet tall. The Kurgan were the largest tribe of giants in the world. They originated in southern Russia and encompassed the entire world. The Kurgan had been genetically traced around the world with haplogroup X1 and haplogroup X2 genes. During World War II, the Nazis attempted to recreate the Kurgan by genetic engineering. There were giants in the earth in those days and after that, as these Danish axe heads clearly demonstrate, for it would take a man at least 15 to 20 feet tall to swing an axe with a head that weighs between 150 and 200 pounds. The Nephilim were a race of giants which once encompassed the entire earth. Today we know quite a bit about them. Archaeology has revealed the artifacts they have left behind. Their history is corroborated by the legends of virtually every culture of the world, including ancient literature, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Book of Enosh, and the Bible. The Inuit Eskimo tribe knew them as the Tuniat. That very same tribe of giants was known to the Norse as the Skraeling. Many people of Western Asia and throughout Europe knew them as the Scythians, who had at one point bested Rome in battle and were said to have been so tall that their feet came close to the ground when sitting on a horse. The ancient Hebrews knew them as Amorites and Canaanites. Sumer is the oldest culture of the world, and the Sumerians give us a tremendous insight into the origin of the giants. The Sumerians recorded that the Anunnaki, a race of celestial beings, the children of Anak and Anu, came to the earth and fathered a race of men, who then became the kings of mortal men. But the Book of Enosh gives us even greater insight to the origin of these giants. Enosh recorded that during the life of Jared, sometime between 3550 and 2550 BC, the sons of God came to the earth from heaven. Since we know Satan is the father of all lies, it is likely that Satan himself influenced them to do the deeds they did. He had puffed them up and built their pride, and for this crime of pride against the Lord, they were cast out of the heavenly realm. Angered for being cast out of their heavenly home, and jealous of the beautiful new creation of God, they consorted to do ungodly things, and swore an oath to each other that each would be equally culpable for the sinful things they were about to do. Their point of entry into the world was Mount Hermon, Israel, upon which they landed.
The giants of old. 30 foot. 6,000 pounds.
Noel Reeves found monstrous footprints near Kempsey, Australia, in sandstone beds on the upper Macleay River. One print shows a toe 4 inches long, and the total toe span of 10 inches, suggesting that the owner of the print may have been 17 feet tall.
In South Africa, a giant footprint of a woman measuring over 4 feet long has been carbon dated at approximately 9 million years old, pointing to the probability of this being a female, human-like species foot. Proportionally, the two-legged being would need to be some 30 feet tall. The local African people commonly referred to this as a highly revered and sacred site.
Prospectors working in the Bathurst district, New Brunswick, in the 1930s frequently reported coming across numerous large human footprints fossilized in shoals of red jasper. Based on the size of these footprints, the people who made them would have been 20 to 30 feet tall.
Even more impressive were fossil deposits found by naturalist Rex Gilroy, around Bathurst, New Brunswick. He excavated from a depth of 6 feet below the surface, and found a fossil of a lower back molar tooth, measuring 67 millimeters in length by 50 millimeters by 42 millimeters across the crown. If his measurements are correct, the owner of this tooth would have been at least 25 feet tall, and weighing well over 5,000 pounds.
In the Megalog Valley of the Blue Mountains, Australia, Mr. P. Holmer found an ironstone protruding from a creek bank. The deeply impressed print of a large human-like foot was on that stone. The print was that of the instep, with all 5 toes clearly shown. This footprint measures 7 inches across the toes. Had the footprint been complete, it would have been at least 2 feet, 60 centimeters in length, appropriate to a 12-foot human. However, the largest footprint found on the Blue Mountains was a footprint 3 feet long, that would represent a giant close to, if not over, 20 feet tall.
European explorers meet tribes of living red-haired giants in the Americas.
The earliest Western explorers who wrote about the giants of North America included Magellan, Sir Francis Drake, Spanish explorer De Soto, and Commodore Byron, the grandfather of the famous poet Lord Byron. Not all encounters with giants were post-mortem. A well-documented sighting by Magellan occurred in 1520, near the harbor of San Julian, Mexico. There, Magellan and his crew came upon a red-haired giant that stood nearly 10 feet tall, and whom Magellan described as having a voice, very loud, and like a bull. Later, Magellan learned from normal-sized natives that the giant belonged to a neighboring tribe. Remarkably, Magellan's logs show that he and his crew captured 2 of these living giants and brought them aboard his ship, intending to bring them back to Europe. Unfortunately, the giants got sick, and they both died during the return voyage. Magellan had their remains buried at sea. 58 years later, giants still roamed San Julian. None other than Sir Francis Drake recorded encountering several red-haired giants who stood over 9 feet tall. In the years that followed, many more explorers and seafarers reported seeing giants roaming the area. If a race of mostly red-haired giants dwelled in the Americas for many centuries, wouldn't their remains and artifacts, not to mention the sites where they lived, still remain? The fact is they do. Many giant skeletons were found in the mounds of North America during the 19th and 20th centuries,